identifying top-down processes, so the top-down perceptual processes. So you can, a bottom-up perceptual process is where your perceptions are being driven by what's in the world. But a top-down process is where your preconceptions impose constraints or limitations or form on the stuff coming in. And the reality is the brain is an incredibly complex thing that does both of these things in balance in order to negotiate daily life. There are whole paradigms like, this is the kind of tangent it's good to bring up, but we don't have time to go down too far. Whole paradigms like one called change blindness. When you show people a scene, I see a couple of nods around the room, so we've got some people familiar with this. You can, sorry?
Gorilla.
Yeah, the gorilla. Has anybody ever seen the film with the gorilla? People playing basketball and a gorilla walks through the room? Okay, again, I see a few nods. Basically, change blindness is where you can demonstrate to people quite viscerally that what they expect to see heavily conditions what they see. So in the gorilla video, you've got people playing basketball in front of some elevators, the original video. And you say to people, can you count how many passes there are between basketball players? They're dribbling the basketball around and people sat there watching. And it's normally on a giant screen. There is no denying that everything that happens on the screen is larger than life, and maybe there are 17 passes, I forget. But during the course of the video, I think this even got turned into a mobile phone ad recently. But basically a gorilla saunters across the screen while people are playing the basketball. And if someone had said, keep an eye out, oh, it's a guy in a gorilla suit, keep an eye out for the gorilla suit. There is no way you could miss it. I mean, on a big screen when I first saw it at a conference, this is like an 11-foot high gorilla. Impossible to miss. But if you tell people, keep an eye out for the basketball passes, they do not see the gorilla. Basically, the only people who do see the gorilla are, well, people like you, basically the kind of people who are like, herding cats, the ones who don't listen to instructions and ask awkward questions. You're the only ones who'll see the gorilla. Okay, right, so that's the broad context. What I'd like to talk about now is the specifics of some of these scenarios. Now, again, well, for this whole talk, I'm in a slightly tricky position that I'm giving you some details about specific yet speculative technologies. And there are 100 or 1,000 variants on each of these technologies. So I'll try to give you the big picture. And if anyone wants to talk about a variant that they think is particularly informative or interesting, please do bring it up. But, okay, so I'm going to talk about uploading, whole brain simulation, virtual autonomous zones, and utility fog. Mainly because, not because this is far from being an exhaustive list, but these are an example of extreme simulation scenarios. These are at the outer edge of the kind of stuff that people imagine might be tractable. Okay, so 3 possibilities: whole brain emulation, so aka uploading. So this is basically replicating all of the activity of your central nervous system in a simulation on some kind of computing machinery, it doesn't matter what, at one or more of several functional levels. So what that means we'll get into a minute, but basically you can describe neural activity at a whole bunch of levels. There are functional levels, there's the function of large aggregates of neurons, there's the function of individual neurons, there are all sorts of supportive tissues that people sometimes want to pay attention, so that's stuff that's strictly not neural tissue, but some people imagine might be playing a functional role. And then some people would say, no, if you were going to model a brain, you would have to model down to a molecular, atomic, or even subatomic level, if such a thing were doable. And these are all kind of issues that we'll get into a bit later on. Sorry, was that I did, actually, if you don't mind, I actually overheard you saying something earlier, which is again the kind of point that it's hard to make in a broad talk, but it's something that does come up, is people pointing out that there's a lot of function that goes on in vertebrates and even invertebrates, down to bacteria, that doesn't involve a neural system whatsoever, but we often equate with goal-oriented, even intelligent behavior. So seeking light, nutrients, that kind of thing, the kind of thing that bacteria do, and don't have a neuron to share between them. And so this is a large class of project. What I'm talking about is simulating everything that would need to be simulated in order to recreate phenomenological awareness in a computer-based environment. Okay, now it's an incredibly broad category, but that's what we're going to be talking about. Secondly, virtual autonomy. So this is, now, one thing I will apologise for. I'm sort of going to do a lot of conflating between AI and uploads. I know that historically these are quite radically different things if this is your personal area of interest, but basically what I'm going to say is that It's the reproduction of human mental life in silico. And so after a certain point, AI and uploads, it starts to get a bit blurry, and I'm not going to draw the distinction apart from when I'm talking about history. So that's the kind of outcome of AI. The outcome of VR, we're talking, the more extreme descriptions of virtual reality development characterize things that you might call a virtual autonomous zone. So this is an extremely powerful computational platform that can host large numbers, a community worth of, or more, of AIs or uploads or whatever, post-biological sentience, and do it with some degree of autonomy. So and people have talked about these kind of things in a lot of different contexts, a lot of different backgrounds. One, some of you might be familiar, there's a science fiction author called Greg Egan who described this kind of thing and called it a polis. Now, Greg Egan's polis is sort of I think about a cubic meter of incredibly dense nanomaterial that's running simulations and is buried under Arctic tundra somewhere. That's a pretty extreme scenario. The whole idea is that it's connected to the world somehow, but this is a hermetically sealed reality simulator that if the rest of the world basically just died and went away, this would keep on ticking. And that's a pretty extreme virtual reality scenario. Thirdly is utility fog. Utility fog is basically a hypothetical application of nanotechnology. We have tiny little nanobots called foglets distributed through space that when they're in their normal sort of standby mode, you wouldn't be aware of them as a human. They're far too small, distributed through space. But they're able to enter alternative modes that gives them function. And one of the more common scenarios, they could be applied to any number of possible things, and similarly they could have any number of problems. But one of the more common applications you hear described for utility fog is the creation of objects out of apparently thin air. So you could have the utility fog form together to create a chair right here. So presumably I have the ability to command this fog, I click my fingers, and a chair appears. Mainly because components, intelligent components that are in the air around me have come together in exactly the configuration required to be a chair for as long as I need it to be a chair.
So this is happening in the real world, it's not happening in a simulation?
This is in the real world. So this is, the reason I really mention it in terms of simulation is it's if you're running a simulation but you want it to have influence in the real world, you need some kind of effectors in the real world. And utility fog is a hypothetical technology based on the principles of nanotechnology that would deliver that, if it worked. Okay, so they're the things I'll talk about. I'm just going to go into each one a tiny bit more detail. So uploading. As I talked about, this is a functional simulation of everything that's going on in your brain. It does, in order to work for a start, it would rely on certain philosophical theories being correct. There are philosophers who believe that the way things are incompatible with the way things would have to be in order for this to work. And these people are normally described sort of in a philosophical or cognitive science context as functionalists, which is to say that the thing that's important about what a brain does is its function, not the medium it happens to be instantiated in. So if all of the functions of a biological brain, and I do apologise, suddenly I'm really sensitive. When I say brain, I mean every relevant part of your body. Okay, so your central nervous system or any cell that's playing a functional role, if all those functions are being replicated in another medium, according to a functionalist, that's fine. The function is being fulfilled, and that's what needs to be done. Related to that is the idea of pattern identity, that what makes you is the pattern of activity that constitutes you. It doesn't, because the cells in your body are reproduced they're replicated at a pretty high rate. Old cells die, new cells are born, they fit into a certain functional position within the hierarchy that is you. And what matters is the ongoing pattern, the continuity. What doesn't matter is a particular cell, or, and some people would say even more extremely, a particular limb or whatever. As long as the roles of the various parts of your body are being fulfilled, that's enough. Now, to go into slightly more detail about something I said before, simulation. This is one of these things that you come across again and again and again with these kind of scenarios. People will use one word, like uploading, to refer to the particular model of this technology they've got in their heads, which might not necessarily be what ends up being workable or